So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Our first speaker is Brad Dimock, and he's going to be talking a little bit about one of our favorite characters in the Grand Canyon, Bert Loper, and about his life a little bit, and specifically about his boat that is partially still on the edge of Grand Canyon. So take it away, Brad.
Okay, good to be here. We'll just start right off. There's a picture of old Bert Loper, and there's his boat a couple days after they found it. And the title of this show is Bert Loper's Boats, because he had a lot of boats, and that yellow one there is just one of them. So there's old Bert at just about 80 years old. And there's this great quote that he had. If I knew that on a certain day I would pass, I would get in my boat and land in Grand Canyon on that day, for it seems to me that it would be such a nice place to pass on to one that loves the whole setup as I do. And he said that 2 years before he died, which is quite remarkable because that's exactly what he did. So these are some models we made for the Page Museum of the 4 big styles of boats in Grand Canyon. On the left is the Powell boat, the Whitehall boat. The next one is a Galloway style, which replaced the Powell boat in the 1890s. And then you've got the Neville's boat, which knocks out the Galloway boat in about 1938. And then finally the Dory, which kind of eradicates all the rest of the wood boats starting in the 1960s. And Loper had, or even might have conceived of, all of these. So kind of a neat tour we're going to have. He starts out in the 1890s on the San Juan River. I think the guy on the back left with the black suit is Bert Loper, because this was taken by Charles Goodman, who was working with Loper on the San Juan. But these are just little boxes with a little bit of rise at each end, and these are kind of ancestral to the San Juan punt. And this, whoops, where'd it go? Right there. That rust-colored boat is a replica of a Neville San Juan punt. And so that's what Loper learned in. He talks about the San Juan. He said, I'd done a whole lot of boating on the San Juan in 1894 and 95. In fact, my boating experience was whenever I could get into a boat. I always liked it. That's the reason I got the experience. Well, he comes back to the river in 1906 in basically a short Powell boat. These are metal boats. And this is what Russell and Monnet and Loper started out in 1906. And of course, Loper got lost along the way, but there's the classic long Whitehall, keeled, round-bellied Whitehall boat that Powell ran. So that's what they ran in 1906. This is an etching of supposedly Loper in Cataract Canyon, but you can see the shape of that boat. And here's a photo after Loper had gone back up into Glen Canyon. This is Russell or Monnet running Hermit Rapid in really low water, and coming out onto Lake Mead. Well, 8 years later, Loper and Russell get back together, and again they go with these metal Powell boats. These ones are actually a little worse than the first ones, and these went to the bottom of the river in short order. So that kind of ends Bert Loper's experience with the Powell style. But the next boat is the Ross Wheeler, sitting here on the shore, and that is more of a Galloway style boat. And here's a close-up of the Galloway style that evolves in the 1890s up in around Vernal, Utah. And when Bert Loper was in Glen Canyon, he saw Galloway and Stone come through in these boats. And then he saw the Cole brothers come through, and he could see that that was a better boat. So he built the Ross Wheeler. We actually have some footage of the Ross Wheeler. There it is, sitting in the water. And this is a different boat right here. This is the Titanic II, which sank, as its name would indicate. But here's the Ross Wheeler in action. You can see that extreme rake on the downstream end is helping pop it up over the waves. Here comes the Titanic. It's more of a shoebox, not a great boat. It went to the bottom as well. And here's a little more footage of the Ross Wheeler in action. And again, that that rake kind of helps lift the boat up over the waves. 1916, he got to be one of the first people known to go through water he went in a canoe. This is a rowing canoe, a Petersboro freight canoe. And then they went, he and Ellsworth Kolb went up to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison with Galloway-style boats that Julius Stone had bought them. And here they are, covered in snow. They ended up hiking out and going to the hospital. It was an ill-fated expedition. 1921, Bert is going pro and did this 6 to 7 month trip down the San Juan through Glen Canyon mapping for the USGS. And these are just basically rowboats at this point. And there's Bert having a cup of soup, and you can see the boat there, just a little wood rowboat, nothing very whitewaterish about it at all. 1922, he's the head boatman for the Green River Survey, and these are classic Galloway style boats. And Bert rode that one in the center of Utah. Here he is in Ashley Falls, which is now under Flaming Gorge Reservoir. And there he is sitting on the boat, waiting for the geologists to do their stuff, and running down through Desolation Canyon. No room for passengers. None of these early boats had much room for anybody but the boatman. 1937, you can see his boats are starting to get a little wider, a little more like the Neville style. And this is a boat he built, Old Betsy, for a run up on the Salmon River. And then in 1939, he builds yet another boat. And this is for his first and only successful Grand Canyon trip. And he went through with Don Harris. And you can see the Neville style Don Harris's boat on the right and Bert's new boat on the left. And again, it's much like a Galloway, but starting to get a little wider. And here's the classic Neville's boat that is beginning to take over. And you can see Bert's boat jacked up on edge. It's definitely wider than a Galloway style would be. So it's somewhere in between. That's Don Harris in the foreground. They had a great trip. Bert did flip in the Gateway Rapid, but we've got a little footage. And the problem you see here is Bert is a little too far back. There's too much boat out there in front of him. And look what happens when he hits a lateral. And you see that time and time again. And that's a problem he never quite figured out, because you see that in his final boat as well. He says, well, hell, I had a good time. And there he is showing Don where they're going to go. And here he is down around Fossil or Forster. And watch again, you see him just get hit. And that huge piece of boat out in front of him kind of takes over. But pretty spry at 70 years old. And they got to the end of that, and the classic line, you know, we had so much fun on this trip. Let's do it again in 10 years when I'm 80. And they did do quite a few trips in the 40s, but eventually Bert's health began to fail, and his wife, Rachel, hid all his clothes. So he'd just sit out in his boat in his pajamas and pout. She knew if he found his clothes, he'd go boating. But by 1949, she realized that if she prevented him from going boating again, he'd just get so mad he'd have a heart attack and die anyhow. So they began Bert's final boat. And Bert said about that boat, he's talking about boat design here. To criticize success is idle chatter. To go through the canyon 6 times is success for Neville's boats. They are a success, but that does not mean I must like them. I think the Neville's boat top is too flat, which is right. And the bottom has too much rake, maybe. He should use a round raised deck to facilitate riding it. Don's boat tipped over twice and ran many miles before he could ride it. So Bert is kind of hypothesizing something more like a lifeboat deck here. And you could see the arched decks there that he's putting on. And it's a taller boat than the Neville's boat, which is definitely an improvement. He also said, there have been 4 or 5 boats tip over endwise, and they were 16 feet. My boat's going to be 18 feet. And so he's building roughly the size of a commercial riverboat. He got the boat wood donated by the Harbor Freight Company, who had, Harbor Freight, for God's sake, the Harbor Plywood Company up in Washington State, who had supplied him with his wood in 1939. And he gets the thing together and he's ready to go. Does a test float in it up in Green River, Utah. You can see there's this weird open hatch up there on the far left. And that's where he kept his motor, and he had a little lid for that. And then he could take the motor out and put it on there as a transom, and it worked much like a classic boat up in Oregon called the Rapid Robert that worked well as a whitewater boat and as a motorboat. So he's fairly progressive. There he is with the Johnson Seahorse, hauling ass up and down the river in Green River. But we all know how it ends. This is not Bert, but this is roughly what it looked like. This is the same guy who was with Bert when he died, Wayne Nichols, sitting out on Don Harris's boat, and that classic line, "Look to your oars, Bert!" And over they went, and Bert was lost. The boat was dragged up. They put this inscription on it, Bert Loper, the grand old man of the Colorado, born July 31st, 1869, which is the day Major Powell discovered the San Juan River, and died July 8, 1949, near mile 25. And there is the old boat pulled up a couple days later. Now, P.T. Riley, who took this picture, had a very dim view of the boat. And it kind of spread through the business. This is a bad attitude, I think, that Riley had. He goes, "He used shingle nails to build it. There was no rocker to it at all. God himself couldn't have rowed that boat and made a respectable showing. It was the most terrible, most horrible answer to running a rapid. If a man didn't know anything, he'd still say he did a hell of a lousy job coming up with this answer." Well, Pat, there was quite a bit of rocker in the boat, and there were a lot of screws in addition to the shingle nails. And the boat did what it needed to do, which was get Bert Loper to his grave. And here's what we have left today. And you can't really blame the boat for this state of repair. Any plywood box that's been out on the shore for 70 years, 80 years is going to look a lot like that. So there's what's left. Well, in 2003, Andy Hutchinson and I here on the left and R.J. Johnson went in and measured all the pieces. And to our amazement, almost the entire boat was there. So we were able to document our fabulous blueprint from that day. And we had a bunch of numbers that went with that. And then finally last year, we decided, well, it's time to build it. And we've got a lot of photographs here on the lofting table. We've got a lot of correspondence. And then you can see the curves on that big board. That's where we're drawing it up as best we can to replicate that. And the reason why we did it last year, well, one, it was going to be Bert's 150th birthday, but it was also going to be Ken Slide's 90th. And now Ken is here on the left a long time ago, here with Harry Ellison. Ken started running in the 1950s and was outraged that the park did not save Bert Loper's boat. And to this day, he's still irritated as hell about that and grumbles about it all the time. So I thought, what a nice thing for Ken to have on his 90th birthday is we're going to build the damn boat. So we did. So here's Cricket Rust, who I think a lot of you know. She's one of my main men there in the shop. She works for Ken X when she's not working for me. And there we are laying up the basic forms off our lofting and pulling her together. And it's really, really rewarding to do this because, you know, if you loft it well and you do your homework, you can really replicate a boat extremely accurately. One problem we had, this Pat Clark, my other helper, he works for Azra, and Bert was able to get a 5-foot by 18-foot sheet of plywood. We had to make it out of a whole bunch of smaller pieces. And so that takes a while to build these giant pieces of plywood. This is me screwing that floor in place with my ceremonial screwdriver that was given to me by Buzz Holmstrom's little brother. He said, "You're going to need this." This was Buzz's. So it's pretty exciting to use that screwdriver now and then. We found out Bert liked Seagram's 7 Crown, and he painted his boat a ghastly shade of yellow. So we thought we ought to put a little Seagram's in the paint. This is the kind of thing that happens in my boat shop. That little maniacal grin there, and painted the darn thing yellow. But there it is. There's the hull of Bert Loper's boat. And then you roll it over, and here are the arched decks that Bert had come up with to help right the boat if it ever went over. Of course, he never found out if that was going to work because he died in his first flip. And here we are celebrating the decking of the Loper boat. And then replicated the final inscription on the deck there. And there's a Bert Loper hat, a Bert Loper life jacket, and a 1940s bottle of Seagram's. So we took it out on the lake, and you can see in the back here, in the foreground, the motor hatch. We've got that latch shut right now. And here's some very wretched footage of us testing out the boat for its stability and rideability. So it comes right over, just like it did with Bert in it, 24.5 mile. But if you look, you'll see those arched decks are actually holding the gunnel of the boat up out of the water, which is exactly what Bert had hoped it would do. And it also makes it a little unstable. We're going to try and climb up on it, and it's pretty tippy, unlike a flat deck boat. And it's darn near coming over right there. Yeah, we can both get our foot on that. Gonna get our feet on there and give it a yank. 1, 2, 3, and boom.
Nice.
Right. So Bert was right. It was a good idea. On his 150th birthday, we took the boat up to Lee's Ferry and had 150 candles going on the cake there. You wouldn't think you could get 150 candles burning all at once, but you can. And got everybody on the ramp around there ready for one big mighty blow. And happy birthday, Bert Loper. Oof. And tried it out with a motor, and with that big broad transom there, the thing actually motors quite well. And this is me channeling Bert up at Lee's Ferry. And then we took it up to Moab, ran the Moab daily with it. It rose quite well, really. I'm way more impressed with the boat than I thought I would be. And in fact, we should have just recently gotten off the river with it. We were going to take it on the guide training trip back in April. But as you all know, COVID had different ideas. So we're planning to take it down next year. And then we went up to Pat Creek Ranch and snuck it into Ken Slight's backyard for his 90th birthday. And there he is, tickled pink, having a shot of Bert Loper's Seagram's with his Bert Loper outfit. And here's a very rare photograph. That's Ken in the driver's seat and me holding the bow line. But that's all three Quist brothers in the same place, not fighting. And I don't think that's ever been seen before. And that's all I got. So enjoy and stay tuned for the question and answer where he shot up in the loft in the Loper boat. See you next time. Burp. Oh, wait. This is Bert's last comment here. He said, when I build again, the top will have the same rake the bottom has. For what I cut off the bottom to make the rake, I will put on the top. And you can figure it out for yourself that it would nearly right itself. And what he's hypothesizing here is a dory, where you see the bottom has the extreme rake and then the top has it too, which actually works really well in whitewater. So Loper was not as primitive as most folks think. Okay, now really, I'm done. See ya, bye. That's it.